The two brothers walked into that gym like they owned the world. Undefeated, decorated, dangerous. They saw a man in dirty work clothes kneeling on the floor, covered in grease, fixing a broken heater. They laughed, they pushed, they grabbed. What happened next took less than 2 seconds, and neither of them saw it coming. Because the man they chose to humiliate that night wasn't a mechanic. Not really. He was something the military spent years building, and even longer trying to forget. If you're new here, hit subscribe right now. Drop a comment telling me what city or country you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. And if you stay until the end, you'll understand why some of the most dangerous people in the world look like nobody at all. The cold came in from the north that November, the kind that didn't just chill you. It pressed against you, like a hand flat on your chest, reminding you it was stronger. By 9 o'clock, the streets of Ridgeport's industrial district had emptied out almost completely. Trucks were parked, shutters were pulled. The only light spilling onto the wet asphalt came from a pair of high windows near the top of Iron Forge Combat Center, a boxing and martial arts gym wedged between a shipping warehouse and a transmission shop on the corner of Caldwell and Ninth. Inside, the heat was broken. A single work lamp sat propped against the base of the far wall, throwing a tight yellow cone across a maze of copper pipes, sheet metal panels, and hand tools laid out in careful sequence on a folded drop cloth. Pliers, adjustable wrench, a voltage tester with a cracked handle, wire strippers, a worn multimeter that had probably seen more job sites than most men see countries. And kneeling in the middle of all of it, forearms resting on his knees, breath coming out in small visible clouds, was Adrian Knox. He wasn't particularly big, wasn't particularly small. 34-year-old, though the lines around his eyes could have passed for 40. His hair was kept short out of habit rather than vanity. His jacket, a faded canvas work coat with a torn left pocket, was smeared with grease from the HVAC panel he'd been elbow deep in for the past 90 minutes. His hands, wrapped around a circuit board he was examining under a penlight clenched between his teeth, bore the particular map of scar tissue that only comes from years of work that doesn't care about your comfort. He didn't play music while he worked, no earbuds, no radio. Just the low hum of the building settling in the cold and the occasional tick of the metal ductwork contracting. He liked the quiet. He'd spent enough years in places where quiet meant something had gone very wrong, where silence was a threat assessment, not a comfort. Learning to exist inside it without that old alarm wiring firing up had taken him the better part of 3 years. He was getting better at it. Most nights. He set the circuit board down carefully and reached for the multimeter. The primary control relay had shorted out, classic failure point on this model, compounded by moisture intrusion from a cracked exterior vent seal he'd found earlier. The fix wasn't complicated, it was just tedious, and tedious required patience, and patience was something Adrian Knox had learned the hard way, in the kind of classrooms that don't hand out certificates. He checked the resistance reading, nodded once to himself, reached for the wire strippers. The front door opened. He didn't look up. Footsteps. 2 sets. Heavy, confident. The kind of footsteps that expect a room to respond to them. A burst of cold air swept across the mats, carrying the smell of winter night, and something else, cologne, too much of it, the kind young men wear when they want to be noticed. Still, Adrian didn't look up. Yo, somebody actually in here? The voice was young, mid-20s maybe. That particular flavor of loud that isn't volume so much as entitlement. Like the speaker has never once considered that the sound he makes might be unwelcome. Adrian pulled a length of insulated wire from the panel housing. Maintenance, he said, without turning around. Heating system. Should be done in an hour or so. A pause. Then a low laugh, shared between the two of them. A private joke at his expense that they didn't bother making private. Maintenance, one of them repeated, mimicking his flat tone. Great. That's real great. Their names were Blake and Mason Carter. Adrian didn't know that yet. What he knew was the sound of their shoes, expensive training sneakers, not street shoes, and the particular rhythm of how they moved through a space. They weren't clumsy, they were comfortable. The kind of comfortable that comes from owning every room you've ever walked into, because no one's ever given you a reason to feel otherwise. Blake was the elder by 2 years. 27, broad through the shoulders, with the kind of jaw that photographs well, and a record. 18-0, regional champion, 2 national tournament medals. that he had been told about so mmany times by so many people that he'd stopped questioning whether it meant what everyone said it meant. He'd started training at 11. His father had pushed him, then his coaches had pushed him, and then at some point the pushing had stopped being necessary because Blake had learned to want it himself. The hunger was real, so was the talent. Mason was 25, leaner, faster, with sharper eyes and a habit of watching before speaking, which could have been mistaken for intelligence, and sometimes was, but was more accurately described as the instinct of someone who has learned to follow his brother's lead and time his entrance accordingly. His record was 14-0. He fought at a lower weight class and moved like water, all flow and pivot and sudden explosive commitment. Their coach called him the most naturally gifted striker he'd ever trained. Together, they were the Carter brothers. In Ridgeport's combat sports circuit, that meant something. In this building, at this hour, it meant they felt entitled to be anywhere they wanted. "You're going to track grease all over the mats," Blake said. He was maybe 12 feet away now, just inside Adrian's peripheral vision. "I've got a drop cloth down," Adrian said. He kept his voice neutral. "I won't touch the mats." "You're already touching the mats." Adrian glanced back. His drop cloth was laid along the edge of the rubber flooring, a clean buffer between his work area and the competition surface. "I'm not on the mats," he said simply, and turned back to his work. Blake looked at Mason. Mason smirked. They started warming up. It began normally enough, footwork drills, shadow movements across the center of the floor. But they drifted. Slowly, casually, the way water finds low ground, they moved closer to his workspace. Adrian felt it before he fully tracked it. He registered the encroachment the way he registered a lot of things. Not with alarm, but with a quiet update to his internal situational map. Two hostiles, non-immediate, escalatory behavior, maintain task, monitor. He turned back to the panel. "This place is seriously letting randos in overnight now," Mason said, to no one specifically. "That's wild. Think the owner knows?" "Probably hired from Craigslist, $5 an hour." Another shared laugh. Adrian said nothing. He pulled the damaged relay free from its housing and set it aside. Reached for the replacement unit he'd pulled from his parts kit. Blake's foot connected with the corner of his tool roll. Not an accident. The timing was too deliberate, the angle too specific. The roll folded open and 3 screwdrivers clattered across the rubberized flooring, one spinning until it came to rest against a weight rack 6 feet away. Adrian sat back on his heels. He looked at the screwdrivers. He looked at his tool roll. He took a quiet breath through his nose, then stood, crossed to the weight rack, picked up the screwdriver, came back, and began re-rolling his tools without a word. Blake watched him do it with an expression of open amusement. "You're going to want to be more careful," he said. "Sorry about that," Adrian said, which was such a startling response that even Mason's smirk flickered for a moment. "You're sorry?" Blake said. He tilted his head. "I kick your stuff all over the floor, and you're sorry." "It's in the way," Adrian said. "I'll move it." He moved it. He rearranged his tools 3 feet to the left, repositioning his work lamp to cover the shift, and knelt back down beside the panel without having made eye contact with either of them. Something shifted in the room. Blake looked at Mason again, and this time the look was different. It wasn't amusement, it was something closer to fascination. The kind that comes with a question. Is this guy actually serious, or is he just waiting for his moment? Most men, after getting their tools kicked, give you something. Anger, or fear, or at minimum the micro-expression of offense, even if they're too smart to act on it. Adrian had given them nothing. No flash of pride, no tightening jaw, no hesitation, just that quiet repositioning, that complete absence of ego, that steady and slightly unnerving calm. Blake had been in enough fights, real ones, not just tournaments, to know that unnerving calm wasn't always a weakness. He decided to test it. "Hey." He stepped closer, close enough that his shadow crossed Adrian's workspace. "I asked you a question." "I didn't hear a question," Adrian said. "I'm asking now. What are you actually doing here, man?" "Fixing the heating relay," Adrian said. "Zone control board burned out. Probably been struggling for a couple weeks. You can tell by the oxidation on the terminals. Another month, and it would have taken the whole secondary circuit with it." A beat of silence. "Cool," Blake said, and the single word was so dismissive it almost had texture. He walked around Adrian's work area, deliberately stepping over the drop cloth border onto the mats, then circling back, his footsteps leaving faint impressions on the cleaned surface. Adrian watched the shoe prints appear and said nothing. He went back to seating the replacement relay in its housing. "So you do this for a living?" Mason asked. He'd moved to lean against the edge of the ring apron, arms folded. There was something different in his voice now. Not just mockery, but a specific kind of cruelty that dresses itself up as curiosity. "Just fixing stuff? Crawling around in people's basements?" "Mostly commercial HVAC," Adrian said. "Some electrical." "That pay well?" "Enough." "Enough." Mason repeated the word the same way Blake had repeated sorry, holding it up to the light to show how small it was. "Man, that's depressing." Adrian said nothing. He was concentrating on the relay connection. The terminal screws were metric, not standard, which meant switching drivers, which meant he had to go back into the tool roll he'd just reorganized, which meant a brief search while his penlight held position in his left hand. This was the part of the job most people didn't see. The accretion of small frustrations, the constant problem-solving, the quiet improvisation. He didn't mind it. He'd been trained in environments where one missed detail killed people. A mismatched screw was, by comparison, a gift. "How old are you?" Blake asked. 34. "And this is it for you? This is the plan?" Adrian looked up for the first time, not at Blake, at the relay board. He seated a terminal screw and began tightening it. "I like the work," he said. "You like it?" "Yeah." Blake crouched down, getting to eye level with him, close enough that Adrian could smell the cold still radiating off his jacket. "See, I don't get that," Blake said, voice dropping into something that was almost conversational, almost friendly, almost genuine, except for the specific quality behind his eyes that Adrian clocked immediately, the quality that said, "I'm doing this on purpose." "I've met a lot of guys who work jobs like this. You know what they all have in common?" He paused. "They didn't have options." Adrian said nothing. "That's not an insult," Blake added. "It's just real. Some people are built for different things. Some people are built to—" He gestured at himself. A slow, open-handed sweep that took in his physique, his posture, the 45 combined victories hanging invisibly in the air around him. Compete. You know? Push themselves. Find out what they're made of. A pause. "And some people fix heaters." The room held the words. Adrian turned to Screw. "Move," he said quietly. Blake blinked. "What?" "You're in my light." Adrian nodded at the shadow Blake's position was casting across the panel. "Can you move a little to the left?" Something changed in Blake Carter's face. It wasn't anger exactly. Not yet. It was something that anger is made of, the specific offense of being treated as an obstacle rather than a presence, of being unmoved. He stood up slowly. "You know what?" Blake said, and his voice had shed all pretense of civility now. "I don't think you understand where you are right now." Adrian seated the last terminal screw. He picked up his multimeter and began checking the connection sequence without looking up. "Victor Hale's gym," he said. "Caldwell and 9th. I got the call this afternoon." He held one probe against a terminal. "You want me to stop? Call Victor. He's got my number." "Victor's not here." "I know." "We're here." Adrian checked the second probe position. The multimeter gave a clean reading. He allowed himself a single small exhale. Blake put his foot on the corner of the drop cloth and dragged it sideways, exposing the direct border between Adrian's workspace and the mats. It wasn't a kick this time. It was slower, more deliberate, a statement rather than a mistake. Adrian watched the cloth move. He set the multimeter down. He looked at Blake Carter for the first time, actually looked at him, full and direct, and without any particular expression, the way you look at a problem you're trying to solve. Blake was bigger than him, younger, faster, trained to a competitive edge that most men never approach. His stance, even casual, carried the muscle memory of thousands of hours of drilling. His hands, currently loose at his sides, knew exactly what to do and how to do it. Adrian had assessed all of that in the first 30 seconds they'd been in the room together. He looked back down at his work. "I'll be out of here in 40 minutes, he said. Blake looked at Mason. Mason unfolded his arms and moved, slowly, without urgency, but with intention, to the right, positioning himself at a slight angle behind Adrian's work area. Not directly behind, off the left shoulder. A flanking angle, whether or not Blake had consciously designed it that way. Adrian felt it. His breathing didn't change. 2 points of contact. Primary aggressor front right, secondary left rear. Exit path currently available behind primary if he steps in. Width of room approximately 40 feet. Nearest substantial cover, ring apron 12 feet. Weight rack 9 feet right. Tools. He stopped cataloging. Don't, he told himself. You're fixing a heater. You're just fixing a heater. Get up, Blake said. Adrian didn't move. Hey, Blake's voice was harder now. I'm talking to you. Get up. I'm almost done, Adrian said. He reached for the panel cover. Blake's hand closed around his jacket collar and pulled. It was fast, and it was hard, and it yanked Adrian off balance sideways, scattering the panel cover across the floor with a hollow metal clang that rang through the empty gym like a starter pistol. Adrian caught himself on one hand. He crouched there for a moment, one knee on the drop cloth, one hand flat on the rubber floor, looking at the panel cover lying 3 feet away. The gym was very quiet. He didn't feel the adrenaline the way he used to. That was one of the things that changed after enough operational time. The spike flattened out. It didn't disappear. It just became information rather than sensation. A reading on an instrument rather than a wave you surfed or drowned in. He was aware of Blake standing above him, hand still extended from the grab. He was aware of Mason behind him and to the left, weight shifted forward. I was aware of the distance from his right knee to the floor, the exact angle of his planted hand, the centrifugal geometry of the space between all 3 bodies in the room. He was also aware that he was very, very tired of this. Not afraid, not angry, just tired. He picked up the panel cover. He stood up. He looked at Blake Carter, still directly, still without any readable expression, and he said the only thing he'd been thinking since the moment they walked through that door. Last chance, he said. Walk away. Blake stared at him. Then he smiled, slow and wide, the way men smile when they are completely certain they're about to win. Or what? He said. And something behind Adrian's eyes went very, very still. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The cold pressed against the windows. And in the silence between that question and whatever came next, in that specific, irreversible half-second, something that had been buried for 3 years climbed slowly back to the surface. It didn't announce itself. It never did. Showmore Blake's smile held for exactly 1 second after Adrian said it. Then it curdled. Not into fear, not yet. Into something that looks like amusement but isn't. The kind of expression men wear when they've decided that the only reasonable response to an insult is to make the other person regret it slowly. Blake Carter had worn that expression before. He knew what it meant, what it required, what it produced. He'd built a career on what came after it. He took 1 step forward. Or what, he said again, slower this time, separating the 2 words like he was handing them to Adrian one at a time. Adrian didn't answer. He set his tool bag down beside the heating panel, carefully, not dropping it, placing it with the kind of deliberate gentleness that is its own form of statement, and straightened up to his full height. He wasn't tall. He wasn't visually imposing. Standing next to Blake Carter, who had 3 inches and 30 pounds on him, and the posture of someone who had never once lost faith in his own body, Adrian Knox looked like exactly what he appeared to be, a tired man in dirty work clothes who had been kneeling on a cold floor for 2 hours. That was the problem, though. That was always the problem with men like Adrian. They looked like what they wanted you to see. Blake moved first. Not a strike. Not yet. A shove. 2 hands flat against Adrian's chest, sudden and hard, the kind of shove designed to test how a man receives force, whether he stumbles back or plants, whether his eyes go wide or stay flat. It told you everything about what you were dealing with, if you knew how to read it. Blake had pushed men before. He knew the vocabulary. Adrian didn't stumble. He stepped back, 1 step, measured, absorbing the energy rather than fighting it, and then he was still again. His expression hadn't changed. His hands had come up slightly, not into a guard, just loose and present at his sides, and he'd shifted his weight maybe 10 degrees to the right, and none of that looked like anything at all to Blake Carter. To someone who knew, it looked like everything. You're not going to do anything, Blake said, and there was the first faint crack in his confidence, so small it was almost invisible, but it was there. A question embedded inside a statement. He hadn't expected no reaction. He'd expected something. Anger, retreat, a clumsy swing, the flinch that tells you where the fear lives. He'd gotten a single backward step and then stillness. And stillness from a man who should be afraid was an answer he didn't know how to read. He decided to stop testing and start pushing. "Mason," he said. Mason was already moving. He came around the left side of Adrian's workspace, unhurried, circling wide enough to cut the angle to the rear exit without making it look intentional. To someone watching casually, it looked like two guys spreading out to have a conversation. To Adrian, it was a flanking formation, so basic it was practically textbook. Standard two-man crowd control, the kind of positioning used to isolate a subject and eliminate lateral escape options. He'd learned it. He'd drilled it. He'd used it in places where the subject in question was considerably more dangerous than a 34-year-old mechanic fixing a heater in an empty gym. He was aware of both of them now, the way you're aware of the walls of a room. Constantly, peripherally, without having to look directly at either one. "Here's what's going to happen," Blake said. He was close now, maybe 5 feet. His hands had dropped to his sides in that specific way. Fighters' hands drop when they're not in a formal stance, but they are absolutely ready. Loose fingers, bent elbows, weight-centered, tournament habit. "You're going to pack up your little toolkit, and you're going to leave, because I've got training to do, and I don't need some—" He paused, looking Adrian over one more time. That slow, top-to-bottom assessment that men use to diminish "maintenance guy in my space." "This isn't your space," Adrian said. Blake's jaw tightened. "What did you just say?" "Victor Hale's name is on the lease. He called me. I have a job to finish." Adrian's voice was even. Not aggressive, not placating, just stating facts, the way you'd read coordinates off a map. "I'll be out in 30 minutes. "You'll be out now." "No." The word landed in the room like something solid. Blake stared at him. Mason, behind and to the left, had gone still. The kind of still that precedes motion. A coiled quality, weight loaded onto his front foot. Adrian had already calculated the distance. Mason was 9 feet back, which meant roughly a second and a half at combat tempo, less if he committed early. Blake was 4.5 feet, which was too close for comfort, and not close enough for most of the options Adrian was not allowing himself to think about. "You're fixing a heater," he reminded himself. "You're just a guy fixing a heater." "You got a death wish?" Blake asked, and the question was almost genuine. There was actual puzzlement in it. The confusion of a man who has run this sequence many times and always reached the same outcome and cannot reconcile why the variables aren't cooperating. "No," Adrian said. "I just want to finish the job. Then leave. Come back tomorrow. Come back when we're not here. System's been down 3 days. Classes start at 6 a.m. Adrian glanced briefly at the panel behind him. "You want 40 kids sitting in an unheated gym in November? That's between you and Victor." Something shifted on Blake's face. The puzzle was becoming an irritation, and the irritation was becoming something with edges. "I don't care about the kids," he said flatly. "I care about you being in my space, in my face, acting like you've got some kind of—" He stopped, shook his head. When he looked back at Adrian, there was a decision in his eyes. "You know what? Forget it. Mason." Mason moved. He came in from the left rear angle, not running, walking with purpose, the specific gait of someone who's been told to handle something and intends to handle it efficiently. His hand came down on Adrian's left shoulder, grip firm, spinning pressure applied to turn him toward the exit. Adrian let the spin happen. He turned with it, went with the force rather than against it, one full rotation. And when he came back around, he was facing Mason, not the exit, and he was 2 feet further from Blake than he'd been a half second ago. He hadn't done anything aggressive, hadn't grabbed, hadn't struck, hadn't even raised his hands. He just moved, and the movement had been so fluid and so completely without wasted energy that Mason stood there for a moment with his hand still extended toward a shoulder that was no longer there. "Don't," Adrian said quietly. Just that. Not threatening. Almost tired. Mason blinked. Then the calculation behind his eyes shifted. The same calculation Adrian had read in the moment Blake decided to stop testing. And Mason stepped back and rolled his neck, and his hands came up properly, the southpaw guard of someone who has drilled 10,000 hours and trusts that drilling more than he trusts anything else. "You want to do this?" Mason said. There was a brightness in his voice now, almost eager. Okay, I'm fine with that." "I don't want to do anything," Adrian said. "I want to finish the relay installation and go home." "Too late for that." Blake came in from the right. He didn't telegraph it. To his credit, Blake Carter was not a man who telegraphed. He closed the distance fast, and his first shot was a grab, not a punch, both hands reaching for the front of Adrian's jacket with the practiced efficiency of a grappler who has learned that the fastest path to dominance is controlling the body rather than striking at it. It was a good technique. Against most people. Against almost anyone who hadn't spent the better part of a decade learning to treat incoming hands as something other than a threat. It would have worked. Adrian wasn't most people. His response was small. Almost nothing. He dropped his chin, slipped his right shoulder back, and let Blake's left hand close on jacket fabric while his right slid past open air. The grip was partial. Blake had half a hold, not a full clinch, and instead of pulling away from it, Adrian leaned slightly into it, just a fraction, just enough to close the distance and disrupt Blake's base. The shift was maybe 3 inches. It looked like nothing. It meant Blake's next move had to be a recovery rather than a follow-through, and in that quarter-second window of recovery, Adrian stepped offline. Blake's follow-up pull landed on empty air. He recovered. He was good. Blake Carter was genuinely good. He recovered faster than most men manage, and turned, and what he saw was Adrian standing 4 feet away, facing him, hands loose at his sides, not breathing hard, not in a stance, just standing there the way a lamppost stands, vertical, present, immovable, without being theatrical about it. The gym was quiet. Mason had stopped. Blake Carter, who had not lost a competitive match in 3 years, who had 12 knockout victories and a regional championship, and had once taken a shot from a semi-professional heavyweight at an exhibition event and kept moving forward, stood in the middle of his training gym and felt, for the first time in a very long time, the specific and deeply unwelcome sensation of not knowing what he was looking at. "The hell are you?" he said. Adrian reached behind him without breaking eye contact and picked up his pen light from the drop cloth. He clicked it on, turned back toward the heating panel. "I told you," he said. "Maintenance." Blake made a sound in the back of his throat. Not a word, just a sound. The sound frustration makes when it runs out of language. And came forward again, faster this time, the patience gone out of him entirely. He was done with testing. He was done with whatever game this was. His right hand came back and he threw it. A real punch this time, not a grab or a shove, a right cross with his hips and shoulders behind it. The kind of punch that had ended fights, the kind you can feel in the air a quarter second before it arrives. Adrian moved his head 3 inches to the left. The punch went past his ear. He felt the displaced air against his temple. He didn't counter. He stepped back, created distance, turned his body so Blake's momentum carried past him, and he was already reestablishing position before Blake had fully registered the miss. 3 feet between them again. 5. Adrian's back came to rest lightly against the edge of the ring apron, and he stopped there, and something in how he stopped, the utter lack of urgency in it, the way he settled against the apron like he'd chosen the spot rather than retreated to it, made Blake Carter's jaw tighten in a way that had nothing to do with his next tactical decision. "You've done this before," Blake said. It wasn't a question. He was still circling, moving laterally, reading angles, doing what he'd been trained to do. His breathing was up. Adrian's wasn't. "Do yourself a favor," Adrian said. "Stop." "Where'd you train?" Blake asked. He was hunting for information now, trying to categorize, trying to file this into a box that made sense. "You're not MMA, not boxing. You move like—" He stopped, tilted his head slightly. "Like something different." Adrian said nothing. Mason circled left, drawing Adrian's peripheral attention, and Blake used the split focus to move, feinting high and cutting for a single-leg takedown, driving forward from 6 feet, explosive and technically clean, the kind of shot that competition wrestlers land on trained opponents. It was a smart play. Against the ring apron, with limited lateral space, against someone who'd been trained in a classical system, it should have worked. Adrian dropped his right hand to the outside of Blake's reaching arm and stepped back with his right foot and turned his hip, and Blake's momentum carried him forward into nothing, one knee hitting the mat, his grip finding Adrian's thigh instead of both legs. Not enough purchase to complete the takedown. Adrian reached down and removed Blake's hand from his leg, not wrenching it, just firm removal, like he was lifting a tool off a shelf, and stepped away. Blake got up. I was breathing hard now. For a moment he just stood there, 3 feet away, hands up, chest heaving, and he looked at Adrian with an expression that was cycling through things too fast to read. Anger, confusion, the beginning of something that might eventually become a different kind of assessment. "Mason," he said, "both of us." Mason came in from the left at the same moment Blake moved right. It was coordinated. They'd trained together. They moved together well. Left-right split, designed to force a central choice and exploit whichever side went undefended. Against a non-trained opponent, it was overkill. Against a trained one, it was good tactics. Against Adrian, he didn't choose a side. He moved backward, drawing both of them toward the center of the room, away from the ring apron, creating space, buying time, retreating not with urgency but with calculation. His feet moved in short, quick steps, barely lifting, a shuffle that maintained base and didn't commit direction until the last possible moment. Blake came at his right. Mason came at his left. The distance closed to 4 feet, 3 feet. Adrian stopped retreating. He let them come. And in the half-second before contact, in the specific moment when both men had committed their weight and their angles and their intent, something changed in him. Not dramatically, not with any visible announcement, just a shift, the way temperature shifts, the way a room gets quieter right before something breaks, and the exhausted mechanic who had been carefully, deliberately occupying the minimum possible space in this building for the past 2 hours seemed to take up slightly more room than he had a moment ago. Not because he'd changed his posture, because whatever had been behind his eyes had stopped hiding. Blake felt it. He couldn't have explained it. Fighters develop a sense for it after enough time. A reading of the microsignals, the infinitesimal adjustments in weight and intention that communicate something language can't. He'd felt it against 2 or 3 opponents in his career, the handful who'd made him understand that what he was doing was genuinely dangerous and not just athletic. He'd always moved through that feeling before because he was good and he was fast and his record told him he was right to trust himself. He moved through it now. His left hand shot out, not a full committed strike but a pawing jab meant to establish range and draw a response, to get information. Adrian slipped it. The movement was so small it was almost insulting. A tilt of the head, a retraction of the chin, the jab sliding past his cheekbone by a margin that couldn't have been more than an inch. And in the slip, in the weight transfer that the slip required, Adrian's right hand came up. Not fast, not slow, just precise, following a path that already existed, as if it had been drawn there in advance, and his hand was simply tracing it. He stopped it 3 inches from Blake's jaw. Not a strike, a stop. His knuckles hovered there, 3 inches from Blake's face, perfectly still. Blake froze. His whole system locked. The kinesthetic memory of 10,000 hours of training, registering what his conscious mind was still processing, that there had been an opening, a clean and catastrophic opening, that had been there and then offered back to him like a question. Mason had stopped too. The room held all of them in that specific silence, the 3 of them frozen in a geometry of violence that hadn't completed itself. And the only sound was the hum of the heater, cycling on for the first time, warm air beginning to move through the vents above them. The job was done. Adrian lowered his hand. He stepped back, slow, deliberate, the way you step back from the edge of something you've decided not to go over. He turned around. He walked back to his workspace. He picked up his multimeter and his tool roll and began packing his equipment with the same methodical care he'd unpacked it with. Drivers nested, pliers clipped, the circuit board he'd replaced wrapped in a cloth sleeve and set in the side pocket where it wouldn't rattle. His hands weren't shaking, not yet. He could feel the adrenaline in his chest like a fist opening and closing, slow and rhythmic, and he breathed against it, pushing it down, the old technique, the one that had taken him almost a year to learn properly. In through the nose, 4 counts. Hold, 4 counts. Out through the mouth, 4 counts. His old team leader, a man named Garris, who'd been built like a shipping container and had the stillness of deep water, had taught him that one in the back of a vehicle on a dirt road outside a city Adrian wasn't supposed to have been in. "You run hot, Knox," Garris had told him. "That's useful. But hot without control burns everything, including you. So you learn the breathing or you get yourself killed. Your choice." He'd learned the breathing. He wasn't thinking about Garris. He was packing his tools and not thinking about Garris and not thinking about the fact that that his hand had been 3 inches from. He fastened the tool roll. Behind him, neither Blake nor Mason had moved. He could feel them still. Two warm presences in the cold room, watching him pack up his equipment, and the silence they were maintaining had a texture to it now that it hadn't had 10 minutes ago. It was the silence of men who are reprocessing something, whose understanding of a situation has revised itself without their permission and hasn't finished settling yet. Adrian picked up his work lamp, collapsed the stand, set it in its carry case. "You should ice your wrist," he said, without turning around. "Left side. You shifted when you came in for the takedown, protecting it. Old injury or something you caught recently. Either way, it's going to stiffen up tonight." Blake said nothing. "And your brother throws his right shoulder when he fires the southpaw cross. He doesn't know he does it. It's maybe a quarter inch, but at competition level, someone's going to catch it eventually." Adrian picked up his parts kit. "Tell your coach, before it costs you something." He picked up his work bag. Checked the panel one more time. Relay secured. Housing reinstalled. Cover plate back in position. The thermostat on the wall read 62 degrees and climbing. By morning, it would be in the low 70s, warm enough for a full training session, warm enough for 40 kids doing footwork drills and pad work and whatever else Victor Hale had on the schedule for his 6 a.m. class. He turned around. Blake was standing exactly where he'd been. Mason, 6 feet to his left. Both of them watching. Blake's expression had shed the arrogance completely now, not replaced by fear, not quite, but something more complicated, something that looked like a man finding out that the map he's been using doesn't match the territory and trying to stay calm about it. Adrian looked at him, just for a moment. "Lock the front door when I leave," he said. "There's a secondary latch above the knob. Victor said the main bolt's been sticking." He walked to the door. He pushed it open. The cold hit him immediately, that flat November pressure. And for a moment he stood in the doorway with the warmth of the repaired heater behind him and the dark of the industrial street ahead, and he breathed it in, the cold air, clean and real and uncomplicated. His hands started shaking in the parking lot. He made it to his truck before it hit him fully. The specific biochemical reckoning that follows the kind of focus he'd just spent, the body presenting its bill for what the mind had borrowed. He sat in the driver's seat with his hands on his thighs and breathed through it, counting, the way Garris had taught him, until the shaking tapered and then stopped. He sat in the dark for 4 minutes. Then he started the truck. The heater in the cab was slow to warm. The truck was old, a 2009 with rust on the wheel wells and a passenger mirror held in place with electrical tape. But he didn't mind it. He pulled out of the lot and onto Caldwell and drove north, and the industrial district fell away behind him, and Ridgeport opened up into its nighttime geography. The amber pools of streetlights, the dark windows of closed storefronts, the occasional lit window of someone awake at this hour for their own private reasons. He drove with both hands on the wheel. He didn't turn on the radio. He was 3 miles from home when his phone buzzed on the passenger seat. He glanced at the screen at a red light. Victor Hale's name. He let it go to voicemail. Whatever Victor wanted to say could wait until morning. Adrian had finished the job. He'd done what he came to do. The heater was running, the building would be warm for the 6 a.m. class, and whatever had happened in that gym tonight, whatever the Carter brothers were sitting with right now in that empty space, was over. He told himself that. He almost believed it. The light turned green. He drove. And somewhere behind him, in the parking lot of Iron Forge Combat Center, a black SUV sat with its engine running and its headlights off, and the man behind the wheel watched Adrian Knox's taillights disappear around the corner before he picked up his own phone and made a call that Adrian Knox knew nothing about. The black SUV sat in the Iron Forge parking lot for another 6 minutes after Adrian's taillights disappeared. Then it pulled out slowly, no headlights until it reached the corner, and turned south toward the part of Ridgeport where the streets had names instead of numbers, and the buildings had lobbies instead of loading docks. Inside the gym, Blake Carter stood in the middle of the mat and didn't move for a long time. Mason had sat down on the edge of the ring apron. He was looking at his hands, not examining them, just looking at them the way you look at something familiar that has suddenly become strange. He'd thrown at least 6 clean combinations tonight, technically sound, properly timed, the kind of sequences his coach called competition ready. He had landed none of them. Not one. And the man who'd made them all miss hadn't been in a stance, hadn't been warmed up, hadn't been wearing anything except work clothes and a canvas jacket with grease on the sleeve. "Blake," he said. Blake didn't respond. "Blake." A pause. "Who was that guy?" Blake finally moved. He walked to the water station along the far wall, filled a cup, drank it standing up with his back to his brother. His ribs ached on the left side, a dull, persistent throb that had been there for 3 weeks, a stress bruise from a sparring session that he told his coach was fully healed. The mechanic had noticed it from across the room in the dark, from the way Blake had shifted his angle coming in for a takedown, had called it out without even looking back. He set the cup down. "I don't know," he said. It was the most honest thing Blake Carter had said in a long time. He picked up his phone. Victor Hale's number was in his contacts. Victor had given both brothers open access to the gym 3 months ago, a professional courtesy extended to regional champions who brought visibility to the facility when they trained there. He scrolled to the number and then stopped, thumb over the call button. He put the phone back in his pocket. "Let's just train," he said. Mason looked at him. "You serious?" "Yeah." "Our hands are shaking, Blake." "Then we work until they stop." He walked to the equipment rack and pulled down a jump rope. "That's the drill. That's always been the drill." Mason watched his brother for a moment, then stood up from the ring apron and crossed to the equipment rack and pulled down his own rope. They trained in silence for the next hour and a half, the sound of the ropes and their footwork and their breathing filling the gym that was now, finally, warm. Neither of them spoke about it again that night. Neither of them slept particularly well. Adrian's alarm went off at 5:45 the next morning. He lay still for 30 seconds before shutting it off, the way he always did. Not from reluctance to get up, but from the old habit of taking 30 seconds to establish where he was and whether anything in the ambient sound of the building had changed during the night. Old programming. He'd tried to unlearn it, hadn't managed. His bedroom was small. A bed, a nightstand, a dresser with a broken bottom drawer he'd been meaning to fix for 4 months. A closet with the door that didn't quite close, hanging open 3 inches to show the dark interior. He could hear Copper downstairs, the dog's nails clicking against the kitchen tile as he moved from his water bowl to the back door and back again, the routine so established it served as its own kind of clock. Adrian got up. He made coffee in a machine that was older than his truck, dressed in clean work clothes, not clean like pressed, clean like washed. There's a difference. And sat at the kitchen table with the mug and his phone. Victor Hale had called twice. He'd left one voicemail. Adrian played it. "Hey, it's Victor. Listen, I talked to the Carter boys this morning. I know what happened last night. Call me when you get a chance. And Knox, good work on the heater." He played it twice. He set the phone face down on the table and drank his coffee. Copper appeared at his knee, a mid-sized mutt with a brindle coat and one ear that stood up and one that didn't, rescued from a county shelter 2 years ago, looking like something that had lost every fight it had ever been in. Adrian reached down and scratched behind the functioning ear without looking away from the window and the lightning sky outside. "It's fine," he told the dog. Copper put his chin on Adrian's knee and exhaled. "It is," Adrian said. He finished the coffee, rinsed the mug, clipped the leash to Copper's collar and took him out for 40 minutes, their standard route, east on Meridian, north up the park path, back along the Riverwalk, home. He ran the first mile and walked the rest, the way he always did, his breath coming out in clouds in the cold air, Copper trotting at his side with the focused contentment of a dog who has exactly what he wants. By 7:15, he was back at his workbench in the garage, reviewing the service orders for the day. A school in the West District needed a compressor swap. A restaurant on Harbor Street had a refrigeration unit running 10 degrees warm. A dental office in Midtown had called about a thermostat, probably a calibration issue, 2-hour job at most. Ordinary day. Good. He loaded his truck and drove. He did the school first because it was the most complex job and he liked to handle complexity before noon, when his concentration was clearest. The compressor swap took 3 hours and went smoothly, except for one corroded mounting bolt that required a different extraction technique and 20 additional minutes, which he'd accounted for in his estimate because corroded mounting bolts were more common than not in buildings this old. He talked briefly to the facilities manager, a heavy-set man named Gerald, who offered him bad coffee from a machine in the break room and asked about his weekend plans. Adrian said he didn't have any. Gerald said that was either very peaceful or very sad, depending on how you looked at it. Adrian said probably both. Gerald laughed like it was funnier than it was, and Adrian appreciated the effort. He ate lunch in his truck. A sandwich he'd made that morning, a bag of chips, a thermos of water. Parked on the street outside the school, watching a crossing guard help a group of kids across an intersection with the kind of absolute authority that crosses age and station and reminds you that some jobs are important not because they're complex, but because they show up every day. His phone buzzed. Victor Hale again. This time he picked up. Victor? Knox. A pause. You doing okay? I'm working. Yeah, I figured. Another pause, the kind that has words already selected and waiting. I talked to Blake this morning. He called me. Which, I want you to understand, Blake Carter has never in 3 years of training at my facility called me on his own to report something. He calls his coach. He calls his manager. He doesn't call me. A beat. He called me. Adrian looked through the windshield at the crossing guard shepherding another cluster of kids. Okay, he said. He told me what happened. His version. Then Mason texted me his version. They're the same version, which is interesting because usually when two people tell you the same story independently, it means either they agreed on it beforehand or it actually happened that way. Victor's voice was careful. Knox, were you in? I fixed the heater, Adrian said. It's running. Zone control should hold through winter, but you'll want to check the vent seal on the exterior north face before the first heavy snow. I'll email you the service report. Silence on the line. Adrian, Victor said, and the use of the first name changed the register of the conversation. Victor was in his late 50s, former military himself. Marines, 2 deployments, though he'd left the service before the era of operations that Adrian knew, before the programs that didn't get announced. He'd built Iron Forge from a rented space with 6 students into a legitimate regional training center over 15 years. He was a man who had learned to read people the way you read weather. Not always exactly right, but rarely surprised. Those boys came in here this morning and they were different. You understand what I mean? I've had them in my facility for 3 years. I know how they move, how they warm up, how they talk to each other. They were different this morning, quieter, not beaten up, not physically, but something in how they were carrying themselves was different. Adrian said nothing. Blake asked me, Victor continued, if I knew anything about the maintenance guy, the one who fixed the heater. What did you tell him? I told him you'd been doing maintenance work for me for 2 years and you were good at it. That's true. It's partial, Victor said, and there was something in the word, not accusation, just precision. Adrian, I was in the service. Not the same branch, not the same era, not the same category. But I know what I'm looking at most of the time when I'm looking at it. A pause. You want to tell me what actually happened in my gym last night? Adrian watched the crossing guard fold up her stop sign and walk to the sidewalk. I fixed the heater, he said again. They pushed. I didn't push back. Everybody went home. He paused. It's a good facility, Victor. Those kids are lucky to have it. A long silence. All right, Victor said finally. All right, you're going to get another call today, though. I want you to know that up front. From who? Victor hesitated. There's a man named Carver, Dale Carver. He was in the parking lot last night. I don't know why. He's not affiliated with my gym. I don't have a relationship with him. But he called me this morning and he mentioned your name. Said he'd been watching through the window and he wanted to talk to you. Something cold and specific moved through Adrian's chest. What does he want? He didn't say. He was polite, careful. The kind of careful that means the words aren't the message. Another pause. Adrian, do you know who that is? Adrian knew exactly who that was. He'd been hoping he didn't. Send him my way, he said. It's fine. He hung up. He sat in the truck for a long moment. The street outside was ordinary. A bus stop. A woman pushing a stroller. A kid on a bike with a too big backpack bouncing with every bump in the sidewalk. The absolute mundane normalcy of a regular Tuesday in a mid-sized city where nothing particularly significant was happening, and people were just living their ordinary lives in ordinary ways. He started the truck and drove to Harbor Street. The refrigeration unit at the restaurant was exactly what he'd expected. A condenser coil partially blocked by grease accumulation, causing the compressor to work harder than necessary and run warm. He cleaned the coil, checked the refrigerant charge, replaced a failing capacitor, and had the unit running properly in 90 minutes. The head chef, A woman in her 40s with flour on her sleeve and the efficient movements of someone perpetually behind schedule signed off on the service order and asked if he wanted something to eat. He said no thank you. She gave him a roll anyway, a still warm bread roll in a paper bag that he ate in the truck heading to Midtown. He was on his second traffic light when the other call came. Unknown number, Ridgeport area code. He answered, Knox. Not a question, a confirmation. The voice was even, measured, the particular tone of men who have learned to keep everything out of their voices because voices give things away, and things given away cost something. Who is this? Adrian said, though part of him already knew. My name is Dale Carver. I think you might know why I'm calling. I fixed a heater last night. I don't know why that concerns you. A short pause. Not surprised, just patient. I was in the parking lot. I saw what happened. Nothing happened. Knox. The tone shifted, almost imperceptibly. Not warmer, more direct. The way a conversation shifts when the person decides the polite path isn't working, and the direct one is more respectful anyway. I've been working security and private threat assessment for 11 years. Before that, I did 8 years in federal law enforcement. I know what I'm looking at when I see it. You were CQB trained and trained well, and you've been operational in environments that aren't academic. That's not a criticism. That's just what I saw. Adrian drove. What do you want, Mr. Carver? A conversation. In person. Today, if possible. A pause. I have a client with a problem that requires a specific kind of help. I've been looking for the right person for about 3 weeks. I wasn't expecting to find him fixing a heating unit in a martial arts gym. The light turned green. Adrian drove through it. I'm not interested, he said. You haven't heard what it is. Doesn't matter. Knox, I'm a maintenance technician, Adrian said. I have 3 service calls today, and I need to get to the third one before 4 o'clock. If you have a legitimate facility maintenance need, I can email you a service quote. Otherwise, there's a 14-year-old girl, Carver said. The truck moved through 2 more blocks of traffic. Adrian didn't respond. Her name is Sasha Reeves, Carver continued, and his voice had changed again. Not manipulative, not performing, just stating it the way it was. Her father is a client of mine. 6 days ago, she didn't come home from school. Police have a missing persons case open. My firm was brought in to run a parallel track. We've developed some information about where she might be and who has her, but the situation on the ground is... He stopped, chose the next word carefully. Complicated, in a way that requires someone with a specific background. Adrian pulled over. He sat at the curb with the engine running. Outside, Ridgeport moved around him. A delivery driver wrestling a hand truck up a sidewalk ramp. 2 office workers in coats walking fast against the cold. A pigeon investigating something near a storm drain with the single-minded focus of a creature that has narrowed its entire existence down to the next meal. How old? Adrian said. 14. She's been missing 6 days. A pause. Knox, I need to be straight with you. The situation has a time component. These things always do, and this one especially. He didn't elaborate on why. He didn't need to. Adrian knew why. The longer a kid stayed missing, the further they went. That was just arithmetic, and arithmetic didn't care about anybody's feelings. He closed his eyes for 3 seconds, opened them. Where? He said. The address Carver gave him was a coffee shop on Larimer Street, which was either a very normal choice for a sensitive meeting or a very deliberate one, the kind of place where 2 men having a quiet conversation in a corner booth generated exactly 0 ambient suspicion. Adrian arrived 7 minutes early, which was habit, ordered black coffee at the counter, and took the seat with his back to the wall in a clean sight line to both the front entrance and the hallway leading to the restrooms and the rear exit. He sat with both hands on the table and watched the door. Carver came in at exactly the time he'd said, which told Adrian one thing immediately. Either the man was punctual by discipline or punctual by design. And either way, it was worth noting. He was mid-40s, medium height, the kind of build that doesn't announce itself but doesn't apologize either. Dark coat. No tie. He moved through the coffee shop the same way Adrian had clocked the Carter brothers moving through the gym, with the specific comfort of a man who assesses space automatically and has done it long enough that it no longer feels like work. He sat across from Adrian and put his phone face down on the table between them. Knox, he said. Carver, Adrian said. A waitress appeared. Carver ordered coffee without looking at the menu. When she left, he opened a manila folder he'd been carrying and placed two photographs on the table, turning them so they faced Adrian. The first was a school photo. A girl, 14, with her mother's dark eyes and the particular expression of someone who has been asked to smile for a camera and is doing their best with it. Brown hair, slightly too big ears she hadn't grown into yet, a small scar at the corner of her mouth that the school photo hadn't been taken at the right angle to hide. The second was a surveillance image, grainy and shot from a distance, time-stamped 6 days ago at 4:47 p.m. A girl, the same girl, same coat, same backpack, getting into the back of a dark sedan 2 blocks from her school. The hand visible at the door wasn't hers. Adrian looked at both photographs for a long time. "Tell me what you have," he said. Carver told him. It took 11 minutes. He was organized and precise, presenting information in the order of its reliability. Confirmed facts first, then inference, then speculation clearly labeled as such, which Adrian appreciated more than he showed. The girl's name was Sasha Reeves. Her father was Marcus Reeves, who ran a mid-sized import logistics company with contracts that had, in the past 18 months, overlapped with the interests of a man named Theo Vask. Vask operated what publicly presented itself as a freight consolidation business out of a warehouse complex on the south edge of Ridgeport's Port District, and privately operated several things that Carver's firm had been documenting for a third-party client for the past 4 months. He would not say who the third-party client was. He would say that Sasha Reeves's disappearance appeared to be connected to a pressure campaign against her father. Not a ransom situation in the traditional sense, but a coercive one, designed to leverage Marcus Reeves into providing logistical cover for a shipment that his company's port access and documentation infrastructure made uniquely possible. "How many people in that warehouse?" Adrian said. "We believe between 6 and 10. Variable. There's a rotation." Carver slid a third photograph across the table, an aerial shot, commercial satellite, of the warehouse complex. 3 buildings, a main structure and 2 annexes. Fenced perimeter, chain link with barbed wire. 2 vehicle access points. We've had eyes on the exterior for 72 hours. The main structure has activity through the night. The northwest annex goes dark after 10 p.m. and has 1 guard stationed outside. "You think she's in the annex?" "We think she's in the annex." Adrian looked at the aerial image. He looked at it the way he'd looked at the Carter brothers in the gym. Not casually, but with the specific quality of attention that registers geometry, angles, and distances as a language rather than as description. You can't use police because the situation has a complication that makes a direct police approach likely to trigger a response that endangers the girl before anyone can reach her. Carver's jaw tightened slightly. There's an inside element, someone with access to law enforcement communication. We don't know who. We know it's there. You know it's there. We're confident. That's different. Yes, Carver said evenly. It is. Adrian sat back. He looked at Sasha Reeves's school photo. The 2 big ears, the small scar, the best smile she could manage for a camera on an ordinary school day that had no idea what was coming 6 months later. "I fix HVAC systems," he said. "I know what you told me. I'm serious. I have a service call in Midtown in..." He checked his watch. 40 minutes, a thermostat calibration. "Knox. I don't do this anymore." He said it without bitterness, without drama, with the flatness of a statement that has been rehearsed enough times to lose its original texture. "I made a decision. It wasn't easy, and I'm not revisiting it over a conversation in a coffee shop. She's 14. I heard you the first time." Carver leaned forward slightly. "I need someone who can move quietly through that compound, locate the girl, and get her out before anyone inside knows the perimeter has been breached. I need someone who can handle contact if it happens and avoid it if it doesn't, and who has the judgment to know the difference in the moment." He paused. "I've been looking for 3 weeks. I've talked to 4 other people. None of them are right for this. You..." He stopped. Started again. "What I saw through that window last night, you handled 2 trained athletes in an enclosed space with 0 casualties and 0 escalation and walked out. You left them standing. That's not a skill set. That's a philosophy, and it's exactly what this situation requires." The coffee shop hummed around them, espresso machine, low music, the ordinary noise of people conducting their ordinary days. Adrian looked at Sasha Reeves's photograph. He thought about what day 6 meant in terms of the arithmetic he'd mentioned to himself earlier. He thought about a 14-year-old girl in a warehouse annex that went dark after 10 p.m. He thought about one guard outside and whatever was inside, and the gap between those two facts that was either nothing or everything, depending on what you found when you crossed it. He thought about Garrus, who had been killed on a Thursday morning on a rooftop in a city Adrian couldn't name in a classified report in an operation that officially hadn't happened, and who had said, among many things in the years Adrian had known him, one particular thing that came back now with the specific resonance of words that don't make full sense until much later. The hardest part of walking away from this work, Garrus had said, isn't the withdrawal. It's the moment you find out you can't walk far enough. Adrian reached across the table and picked up the aerial photograph. He looked at it for a long time. "Show me the approach routes," he said. Carver reached into the folder. Outside on Larimer Street, the ordinary afternoon continued. A bus pulled away from a stop. A woman laughed at something on her phone. 2 kids in school jackets walked past the window arguing about something with the absolute conviction that only arguments about nothing important can sustain. And inside the coffee shop, in a corner booth, a man who had spent 2 years convincing himself he was done with a particular kind of work bent over a photograph of a warehouse complex on the south edge of Ridgeport and began to remember things he'd tried very hard to forget. His hands weren't shaking, not yet. The approach routes were not good. That was the first thing Adrian said, looking at the aerial photograph under the coffee shop's overhead light, which was the warm amber kind that makes everything look slightly more comfortable than it is. He said it without inflection, the way you state a weather condition. Not complaining, just establishing the baseline for everything that follows. North face is exposed the full length of the fence line, he said. No cover, no concealment, ambient lighting from the Port Authority Road spills across that entire approach. Anybody on the roof of the main structure has a clean visual on everything that comes in from the north. "We know," Carver said. "East approach crosses open concrete for about 60 feet before the fence. That's too long." "We know that too." "So you're looking at south or west?" Adrian set the photograph down and picked up the second one. The ground-level surveillance shot, taken from a vehicle on the access road, showing the southwest corner of the main fence line. The vegetation there was sparse but present, a deteriorating windbreak of overgrown shrubs pressed against the chain link, probably remnant landscaping from when the warehouse complex had been a different kind of business. "This," he said, pointing to the southwest corner. "How current is this image?" 72 hours. "The shrub line? It's still there?" "As of last night's observation, yes." Adrian nodded very slightly. Not satisfaction, just data received and filed. He looked at the guard position Carver had marked on the aerial, a small X on the northwest annex exterior, which was on the opposite side of the structure from the vegetation approach. "One guard," he said, "one confirmed. There may be interior personnel with line of sight to windows." "Windows on the annex." Carver slid another photograph across. A ground-level shot of the northwest annex, taken from a difficult angle that suggested the photographer had been moving when they captured it. The annex was a single-story structure, metal-sided, maybe 40 by 60 feet. 2 windows on the visible face, both covered from the inside. A single door, steel, outward opening, visible hinges. Adrian looked at the hinges. "Outward opening steel door with visible external hinges," he said. "That's either very bad security design, or they don't think anyone's coming from outside." "Probably the latter." "Probably," Adrian agreed, "but we planned for the former." He sat back. He picked up his coffee and drank the last of it, cold now, and set the cup down and looked at the spread of photographs on the table between them with the expression of a man who is running a very specific kind of calculation. Not emotional, not excited, not reluctant anymore. Just working. "Timeline," he said. "We need to move before Friday," Carver said. "The leverage play against Marcus Reeves has a deadline. If he doesn't deliver what they want by Friday noon, the situation with the girl changes." He didn't specify how. He didn't need to. "Today is Tuesday. That gives us, I know what day it is." Adrian was quiet for a moment. "I need to see it in person, the compound. I need a vehicle in 4 hours tonight to do a ground assessment. I won't go in, just eyes on. After that, I'll tell you if it's possible." "And if it is?" "Then we talk about what it looks like and who else you have." I have two people I trust fully, former law enforcement, both of them. They know how to hold a perimeter and they won't make decisions that aren't theirs to make. They'll follow a plan exactly as given? No improvisation? Yes. You sure about that? Carver looked at him. I'm sure about one of them. The other I'm 90% sure. Adrian appreciated the honesty. A man who told you he was 100% sure about human behavior under pressure was a man who hadn't seen enough of either. 90% is workable, he said. He gathered the photographs, stacked them, and slid them back across the table to Carver. He didn't keep any of them. He didn't need to. The layout was already in his head. The fence lines, the approach angles, the guard position, the door hinges, the window positions. Organized and filed in the specific cognitive architecture that years of operational planning had built inside him, and that 2 years of HVAC work had not dismantled, however much he'd wanted it to. One more thing, he said. He looked directly at Carver. If I go in and it's not workable, if the situation on the ground is different from what your surveillance shows, or if the risk to the girl is higher than the benefit of the approach, I come out and we find another way. You don't push me past that assessment, not for your timeline, not for your client. Understood. I need to hear you actually agree to that. I agree, Carver said. You call it. Adrian nodded. He stood up, put on his coat, picked up his service bag from the floor beside his chair. I've got a thermostat in Midtown, he said. Carver blinked. Right now? Lady runs a dental office. She's been dealing with a temperature control issue for 2 weeks. I told her I'd be there by 4. He pulled on his left glove, then his right. Send me the vehicle information and a contact number for tonight. I'll reach out when I'm ready to move. He walked to the door. He pushed it open. The cold hit him, and he walked into it, and the coffee shop door swung shut behind him. And on Larimer Street, the ordinary afternoon resumed as if the conversation that had just happened inside that corner booth had not, in fact, just altered the trajectory of the next 4 days of Adrian Knox's carefully constructed ordinary life. He drove to Midtown. The thermostat took 2 hours and 20 minutes, which was longer than he'd estimated because the issue turned out to be not calibration, but a failed thermistor on the zone sensor, which required a parts run to a supply house on the east side and a second trip back. The dentist, a compact woman in her early 50s named Dr. Park, who wore her gray hair short and her impatience openly, supervised the repair process from the doorway of her office with the expression of someone who has learned that the fastest way to get a thing done is to watch it. Adrian didn't mind being watched while he worked. He said almost nothing, and she said almost nothing, and by 5:40 the zone sensor was replaced, calibrated, and running clean, and Dr. Park signed the service order and handed it back with the particular satisfaction of a problem finally resolved. Same time next year for the annual, she said. I'll be here, Adrian said. He drove home. He fed Copper. He ate something. Leftover rice and vegetables from 2 nights ago, reheated, eaten standing at the counter because he wasn't hungry enough to justify sitting down. He changed into darker clothes, a navy thermal base layer, dark gray work pants, a black fleece, boots with soft soles, not tactical gear. He didn't own tactical gear anymore, hadn't in 2 years, but practical clothing that didn't reflect light and didn't restrict movement. He checked his phone. Carver had sent the vehicle information, a dark blue pickup truck parked on Clement Street, keys in a magnetic box under the left rear wheel well. He left his own truck in the driveway. He walked 3 blocks to Clement Street, found the blue pickup, found the keys, got in. The interior smelled like coffee and vinyl cleaner, and there was a folded city map in the door pocket, even though the truck had a working GPS, which Adrian found oddly reassuring. A man who kept a paper map was a man who understood that technology failed and fundamentals didn't. He drove south. The Port District at night was a different city. During the day it was logistics and commerce, the grinding apparatus of freight, trucks queued at way stations, forklifts threading warehouses, the constant movement of goods in and out of the working port on the waterfront. At night the commercial traffic fell away, and what remained was infrastructure, the lights of the Port Authority towers, the distant shapes of container vessels at anchor, the long amber lines of security lighting along the perimeter fences of the bonded warehouse districts. Adrian drove past the vast compound twice without slowing. The first pass was for overview, scale, lighting, surrounding street context, neighboring properties, sightlines from public roads. The compound was larger than the aerial photograph had suggested. The satellite image had flattened the vertical dimensions, and the main structure was taller than he'd estimated, which changed the roof observation angles he'd been calculating. The perimeter fence was standard chain link topped with 3 strands of barbed wire, not razor wire, which was a better indicator of deterrence-focused security than containment-focused. The difference mattered. The second pass was slower, on the south access road that ran along the back of the property, and he let his eyes work the southwest corner, the vegetated approach he'd flagged from the photograph. The shrubs were still there, more substantial in person than in the surveillance image. A dense, overgrown line pressed against the fence, probably 6 feet high at its tallest. In the dark, from the road, the corner was genuinely obscured. He parked 4 blocks away, sat with the engine off. He ran the assessment the way he'd been trained, exterior to interior, known to unknown, confirmed to infer. The exterior was workable. The southwest approach gave adequate concealment up to the fence line. The fence itself presented a standard penetration problem, nothing more, time-consuming, but not complex. The northwest annex was on the opposite side of the main structure from the approach, which meant the guard position was initially screened. Interior unknowns were the limiting factor: number of personnel, interior layout of the annex, exact location of the girl within it, response time from the main structure if contact occurred. The interior unknowns were always where plans fell apart. He sat with that for a few minutes. Then he reached for his phone and called Carver. "It's possible," he said when Carver picked up. "The southwest approach is viable. I need interior information on the annex, layout if you have it, or any signal intelligence from inside the structure. Anything that tells me what I'm walking into before I walk into it." "I have one thing," Carver said. "One of our observers got eyes through the east window of the annex 2 nights ago, briefly. He reported a single large room, cots along the far wall, a partition, plywood or drywall, he couldn't tell, dividing the eastern third. The partition had a door. She's behind the partition. That's our assessment." "How confident?" 70%. Adrian processed that. 70% was not good enough to plan around as a certainty. It was good enough to plan around as a strong probability while building contingency for the 30%. "I'll need a communications setup," he said. "Nothing elaborate. 2-way radio, short range, one for me and one for whoever you have on perimeter watch. If I call it, your people pull back immediately and we abort. No argument." "Agreed. And I need the guard rotation if you have it." We observed a shift change at 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. on both nights of surveillance. So the guard on the annex exterior is freshest at 10, starting to fatigue by 2. Adrian did the math. "I move at 1:15. He's into his 3rd hour. Fatigue is working for me, and I've still got margin before the shift change disrupts the pattern." 1:15 Wednesday night? "Thursday morning," Adrian said. "Technically." A pause. "Okay," Carver said. "What do you need from me between now and then?" "A floor plan of the annex, if one exists. Any permits, construction records, anything that tells me about interior walls, doors, additional exits. Check city records." He paused. "And I need to meet your 2 people before we go, tomorrow, in person." "I'll arrange it." "One more thing." Adrian was quiet for a moment. "If something goes wrong in there, if I don't come out on a reasonable timeline, your people do not come in after me. They call it in anonymously to someone who isn't compromised in the department and they get away clean. The girl first, then clean exits. Not me." A longer pause this time. "Knox, I need you to agree to that," Carver breathed. "All right," he said. "Agreed." Adrian hung up. He sat in the dark truck on the empty street 4 blocks from a warehouse compound where a 14-year-old girl was sleeping behind a plywood partition on a cot, and he breathed through the particular quality of feeling that this kind of work produced. Not excitement, not fear exactly, but a heightened aliveness, a sense of every detail becoming significant, the way sounds become sharper in the moment before something important happens. He'd missed it, and he'd hated missing it, and he'd also been right to walk away from it, and both of those things were true simultaneously, and he had learned to stop trying to resolve the contradiction. He drove home. He slept 4 hours, which was more than he'd expected. The meeting with Carver's 2 people happened the next afternoon at a rented office space in the commercial district. The kind of place that rents by the week to companies between addresses, generic furniture, and fluorescent lighting and no particular personality. Adrian arrived first, which was, again, habit. He made note of the exits and sat in the chair closest to the window. They came in together, a man and a woman. The man introduced himself as Decker. Late 30s, former sheriff's department, built with the heavy-set solidity of someone who had played football in college and kept the muscle without keeping the speed. His handshake was firm, without performing firmness. He looked at Adrian steadily and didn't say more than was necessary in the first 30 seconds, which Adrian read as discipline rather than unfriendliness. The woman was Tara Souza. Early 40s, dark-haired, with a quality of stillness that was different from Decker's solidity, more watchful, more calibrated. She'd spent 9 years in federal law enforcement, Carver had told him. She had the particular economy of movement that comes from years of working in environments where drawing attention was a professional liability. Adrian looked at both of them. "You know the objective," he said. It wasn't a question. "Extract the girl," Decker said. "Minimize contact, avoid escalation." "And if escalation happens anyway?" Decker and Souza exchanged a brief look. "We're not here to engage a firefight," Souza said. "We hold the perimeter, cover the exit, get the package out." "The package has a name," Adrian said. "A beat." "Sasha," Souza said. "We get Sasha out." Adrian nodded. "Your perimeter position here and here." He laid the aerial photograph on the table and indicated the 2 points. "Decker, you're on the south access road with the vehicle running. Engine warm the whole time, you don't shut it down for any reason. Souza, you're here, northwest corner of the outer perimeter, which gives you visual on the main structure entry and the annex exterior. You watch the guard, and you tell me if the pattern breaks." "And if the guard moves toward the annex while you're inside," Souza asked, "you tell me. I handle it." "How?" Adrian looked at her. "I'll handle it," he said again, with the particular finality of someone who is not being evasive but is also not going to negotiate the specifics in advance. Souza held his gaze for a moment. She was deciding something. Then she gave a short nod. "Radio protocol," Adrian continued. "1 click means I'm moving. 2 clicks means I've reached the target. 3 clicks means I'm coming out and you need the vehicle in position. Static burst means abort. You pull back, call it in, and you don't wait for me." "Understood," Decker said. "Questions about anything?" Decker leaned forward. "What's your read on the personnel inside?" Carver said 6 to 10. "That's too wide a range to plan around specifically," Adrian said. "What I know is that the annex has 1 exterior guard and likely 1 or 2 interior personnel based on the observed lighting and movement patterns. Main structure is where the numbers are. My job is to stay out of the main structure entirely." "And if you can't?" Adrian was quiet for a second. "Then you'll hear it," he said. It was not a reassuring answer. Both Decker and Souza understood that and didn't push it further, which raised Adrian's read on both of them considerably. They went over the timeline. They went over contingencies. They went over the abort conditions 3 separate times, which Adrian insisted on because abort conditions were the part of plans that people understood intellectually and then abandoned emotionally when the situation on the ground started generating the particular pressure that made the objectives feel more important than the limits. He'd seen it happen. He'd done it himself, once, in a different context, in a different country, and the result had been something he carried with him, the way you carry a weight that you've learned the exact dimensions of, but never stopped noticing. When they were done, Carver spread a single additional document on the table. It was a printout from the Ridgeport City Permit Office. The warehouse annex had been the subject of an interior renovation permit 8 years ago, filed by a shell company that had since dissolved. The permit included a floor plan annotation, crude, a single page, but it showed the interior configuration at the time of the renovation. The partition was there, exactly where the observer had reported it, and the permit annotation showed something the observer hadn't been able to confirm: a secondary exit on the south face of the annex, a personnel door that wasn't visible from the north or west, that had been added during the renovation and that would, if it hadn't been sealed since, open directly toward the vegetated southwest corner that Adrian had already identified as the cleanest approach. He looked at the floor plan for a long time. "There's your 70%, he said quietly, mostly to himself. Carver was watching him. "Does that change the assessment?" It changes the approach. Adrian traced the route on the floor plan with one finger. I come in from the southwest, move along the south face of the annex, reach the secondary exit, if it's openable from the outside. And it wasn't listed as a locking door in the permit notes. I come in quiet, and I have a shorter distance to the partition, cleaner than going through the exterior guard side. And if the door's been sealed, then I go to the original plan and approach from the north face after I've dealt with the guard position. He paused. I'd rather not do that. Because of the guard? Because of the noise, Adrian said. Nobody asked what that meant. The room understood what it meant. Adrian folded the floor plan annotation and put it in his inside jacket pocket. He stood up. Get some sleep tonight, he said to Decker and Souza. Both of you, not optional. We go at 1:15 and I need you sharp on the perimeter, not running on adrenaline and no sleep. He picked up his jacket. 1:15 Thursday morning, Clement Street, same vehicle. Be there at 12:50. He walked to the door. Knox, Carver's voice. He stopped. Didn't turn around. Why are you doing this? Carver said. Genuinely, you could have said no. You'd already said no. Adrian stood at the door for a moment. His hand was on the frame. Because she's been in there 6 days, he said, and nobody's done anything about it yet that's actually worked. He left. He went back to Iron Forge Combat Center that evening. Not for any planned reason. He'd driven past it on his way home from the meeting. It was on his route, he told himself, which was only partly true. And he'd pulled into the parking lot without fully deciding to, and sat there with the engine running, looking at the building. It was evening now, 7 o'clock. Through the high windows, he could see the lights were on inside, and through the narrow gap where the blind didn't quite reach the window frame, he could make out the shape of people training, the rhythmic motion of bodies moving through drills, the occasional flash of sparring, the ordinary purposeful activity of people working on something they cared about. He got out. He didn't know why. He'd figure that out later, or he wouldn't. The front door was unlocked. He pushed it open, and the smell hit him immediately. Chalk and rubber, and the specific blend of effort and ambition that every boxing gym accumulates in its walls over years until it becomes its own atmosphere. A dozen people were training. A coach he didn't recognize was running a group through combination drills at the heavy bags along the far wall. Someone was skipping rope near the entrance. 2 teenagers in headgear were sparring in the ring, supervised by an older man with a clipboard and the particular stillness of someone who is watching everything simultaneously. Victor Hale was at the back office door. He saw Adrian at the same moment Adrian saw him. He crossed the floor without hurrying. "You should have called," he said. "I was in the neighborhood." Victor looked at him, the kind of look that has known the person in front of it for 2 years and is now recalibrating certain assumptions. I was a compact man in his late 50s with gray at his temples and a jaw that had clearly been on the receiving end of a few things over the years, and he had the quality Adrian had always read in him and appreciated. He didn't perform his authority. He just had it. "Come in the office," he said. The office was small, predictably cluttered with the administrative residue of running a gym. Waiver forms, scheduling boards, a whiteboard with belt grades and test dates, a desk under a geological strata of paperwork. Victor sat behind the desk and Adrian took the chair across from it, which was also a familiar position. He'd sat across from desks like this, from men with authority over some portion of his existence, in enough different configurations over enough years that the posture came naturally. Victor folded his hands on the desk. "Blake Carter called me again this morning," he said. Adrian waited. "He wanted to apologize," Victor said, "which I also want you to understand is not something Blake Carter does. He's a good fighter, and he's been told he's a good fighter by enough people for long enough that he's built a certain kind of self-image around it. A couple of weeks ago, if you told me Blake Carter was going to call me voluntarily to apologize to someone for his behavior in my gym, I would have had trouble believing it." "He doesn't need to apologize to me," Adrian said. "That's what I told him. I said you weren't the type to require it." Victor paused. "Was I right?" "Yeah." "He also asked about you again, specifically. He wanted to know where you trained, who your background was with. He kept saying—" Victor's expression shifted slightly, almost amused. "He kept saying it was the way you moved. He said it wasn't any system he'd seen before, and he's seen a lot of systems." "I moved out of the way," Adrian said. "Mostly." "Knox." Victor's tone dropped the lightness entirely. "I'm not going to push you on your history. Whatever you did before, that's yours. You've been doing good work for me for 2 years, and you keep your business to yourself, and I respect that. He unfolded his hands, placed them flat on the desk. But I'm going to say one thing, and you can take it or leave it. I've known men who walked away from what I suspect you walked away from. Not many, and not well, but I've known a few. And in my observation, the ones who made it, actually made it, came out the other side with something worth having, were the ones who found something that needed them to be what they were. He paused. Not what they used to be. What they were. Present tense. The gym noise came through the office walls. The rhythm of it, steady and purposeful. Adrian looked at the scheduling board. Thursday, 6 a.m. advanced conditioning, 9 a.m. youth beginners, 11 a.m. open mat, 2 p.m. women's self-defense. The heater's going to hold through winter, Adrian said. But get that exterior vent seal replaced before the first heavy snow. I'll email you the part number. Victor looked at him for a moment, then he exhaled through his nose and sat back in his chair. All right, he said. Yeah, okay. Adrian stood. Victor stood. They shook hands the way men who have said something real to each other without quite finishing the conversation. Shake hands. Briefly, firmly, with the understanding that the rest of it can wait. Adrian walked back through the gym. He passed the ring where the two teenagers were sparring. The older man with the clipboard, their coach, was calling adjustments in a low, constant voice. Voice, the specific kind of instruction that knows the student so well it doesn't need to raise itself to be heard. The kids moved and corrected and moved again, working, improving incrementally in the way a real skill improves. Not in leaps, but in the accumulation of small corrections over time. Adrian watched them for 30 seconds. He pushed open the front door and walked into the night. He had 32 hours until 1:15 Thursday morning. He drove home. He sat at the kitchen table with Copper's head in his lap and his phone face down on the table beside him, and he thought about a 14-year-old girl in a warehouse annex and a secondary door listed in an 8-year-old permit annotation and the specific and irreducible difference between 32 hours of ordinary life and whatever came after them. He reached down and scratched behind Copper's ear. I know, he said, to no one. The dog exhaled. The kitchen was warm. Outside, the November night pressed against the windows, and Ridgeport settled into itself around him, and Adrian Knox sat with what he'd decided and didn't second-guess it, because he'd learned a long time ago that the second-guessing never came from the part of him that knew anything true. His hands were steady. For now. The 32 hours passed the way hours pass before something you can't undo. Not slowly, not quickly, but with a specific quality of weight, each one slightly heavier than the last. The way a bag fills incrementally until the moment you pick it up and feel the full accumulated mass of everything inside it. Adrian spent Wednesday doing what he always did. He had 2 service calls. A boiler inspection at a small apartment building on the north side. Routine. Nothing unexpected, the building super watching him work with the tired eyes of a man who has been dealing with tenant complaints about heat since October and is running on 3 hours of sleep and cold coffee. Then a refrigeration condenser replacement at a grocery distribution center, which required a 2-man lift that Adrian coordinated with one of the warehouse workers, a young guy named Eli, who talked the entire time about his girlfriend and an argument they'd had about a vacation neither of them could afford. Adrian listened and handed him tools and didn't offer opinions, and by 4:30 the condenser was in, tested, and running, and Eli said, "Thanks, man, you're a good listener," and Adrian said good luck with the vacation and meant it. He ate at home. Leftovers again. He went to bed at 9 p.m. He lay in the dark with his eyes open for a while, not anxious, not running the plan obsessively, just present with the ceiling and the familiar sounds of the house and the weight of Copper at the foot of the bed. And then at some point he was asleep, and then his phone alarm was buzzing at midnight and the 32 hours were gone. He dressed in the dark. Same clothes as before. He added a few things from the locked box on the top shelf of his closet. A small medical kit, compact and specific, the kind that addresses the injuries most likely to occur in a confined space extraction rather than the injuries most commonly addressed in a standard first aid course. A thin pair of work gloves. A ceramic blade, small, clipped inside the left sleeve of his fleece. Not a weapon of first resort. A tool of last resort. He'd carried one for 6 years and used it twice, and both times he'd wished for a different option, and there hadn't been one. He looked at the box for a moment before closing it. There were other things inside it. He didn't take any of them. He locked the box, put it back on the shelf, went downstairs. Copper was awake, sitting at the foot of the stairs, looking at him with the particular expression dogs produce when something has disrupted the established pattern of a household, and they're deciding whether to be concerned about it. Adrian crouched down and held the dog's face in both hands and looked at him. "I'll be back before morning," he said. Copper licked his wrist once, then turned and walked back to his bed in the kitchen corner and curled up and put his chin on the edge of it, watching. Adrian went out the back door and into the night. What? Clement Street at 1250 was quiet and cold and empty, except for the blue pickup sitting at the curb with its engine running, exhaust rising in a white column in the freezing air. Decker was behind the wheel. Souza was in the back seat. Carver was not there, which was what they'd agreed. Carver was the client-facing element, and client-facing elements did not come on the ground. Adrian got in the passenger seat. Decker pulled out without being told. Nobody talked on the drive south. The city moved past the windows, the amber grid of street lighting, the dark intervals between, the gradual thinning of commercial and residential density as they moved into the industrial fringe that bordered the port district. Souza ran a radio check in the back seat, brief and quiet, confirming frequencies. Decker drove with both hands and didn't look at anything that wasn't the road. At 1:12, they parked on a side street 2 blocks from the compound's south perimeter. Adrian checked his watch. 3 minutes. "Souza," he said, "you're on foot from here, northwest corner where we discussed. You need 8 minutes to get there from this position, which means you leave now." Souza opened the door. Cold air came in. She paused with one foot on the street. "Knox." He looked at her. "Come back," she said. Simply. Not dramatically. He nodded. She pulled the door shut and disappeared into the dark. Adrian watched Decker. 2 minutes, he said. Decker nodded. He had his hands on the wheel still, engine running. In the side mirror, Adrian watched the street behind them. Empty. No movement, no light sources that hadn't been there on the earlier assessment. His heartbeat was elevated, but even. He'd learned the difference between the adrenaline that helped and the adrenaline that didn't, and this was the useful kind. Heightened perception, faster processing, the body intelligently allocating resources for what it understood was coming. He pressed the radio once, 1 click. Souza's voice came back, 2 clicks. She was in position. "Keep the engine warm," he said to Decker. 3 clicks means I'm coming fast. Don't wait for me to reach the vehicle before you start moving. "I'll meet you rolling," Decker said. "Yeah." Adrian got out. The cold was absolute, the kind that had purpose. He moved along the side of the road toward the south perimeter fence, staying in the shadow strip between the street lighting and the fence line, covering the distance in the measured, unhurried pace that minimized sound and silhouette simultaneously. The ground was hard, frost in the dead grass along the fence base, his boots finding quiet purchase without requiring conscious effort. His body remembered how to do this the way it remembered how to breathe. The southwest corner was exactly as the ground assessment had shown. The overgrown shrub line pressed against the chain link, creating a tunnel of shadow between the vegetation and the fence. He moved into it, crouching slightly, following the fence line south to where the vegetation thickened into genuine concealment. He went over the fence in 11 seconds. Not gracefully. His left boot slipped on the chain link about 2/3 up, and he had to recover his grip one-handed, which created a brief metallic shiver in the fence that he stopped dead and listened to for 5 full seconds before continuing. Nothing responded to it. He came down on the inside in a controlled drop, knees absorbing, one hand touching the frozen ground to stabilize, and then he was up and moving along the south face of the annex toward the secondary door. The south face of the annex was dark. No exterior lighting on this side. The compound's security lighting was oriented toward the main access points and the north perimeter, which was either an oversight or an assumption, and assumptions were the reason plans like his were possible. He moved along the wall with his right shoulder brushing the metal siding, feeling the cold of it through his fleece, and counted paces from the corner. 18 paces. The permit annotation had placed the secondary door at approximately 20 feet from the southwest corner. He found it at 22. Steel door, as expected. Older than the annex's general construction, a salvage installation. He could tell by the frame integration, patched sheet metal around the rough opening. A single knob, no deadbolt. The permit had noted no locking hardware. People who secured perimeters with chain link and guards didn't always think carefully about the doors on the blind side of their structures. He put his hand on the knob, turned it. It opened. The hinges were dry, and he went slow. 3 full seconds to open it far enough to slip through, keeping pressure on the knob to control the rate and eliminate the squeal that dry hinges produced when swung. He came through sideways and pulled the door to behind him, not latched, just resting. Inside. The smell hit him first. Closed space, propane heat, the residue of food and unwashed clothing, and the specific quality of air that has been recycled in an enclosed area for days. A single battery lamp sat on a shelf near the main door on the north face, turned low. Enough to see by, but not enough to be visible through the covered windows from the exterior. He gave his eyes 30 seconds to adjust from the black outside to the dimness inside. Large room, cots along the far wall, 2 of them, both empty. Storage along the left, cardboard boxes, equipment cases, nothing that looked immediately relevant. And the partition, plywood, rough-framed, floor to ceiling, exactly where the floor plan had placed it, with a hollow core interior door mounted in a steel frame, the kind of door that interior renovation projects use when the budget is tight and function trumps construction quality. A padlock on the door, closed. He crossed the room. The padlock was a mid-range model, not a master, something cheaper, the brand that fills the middle shelf at hardware stores and tells you the people who bought it cared about the appearance of security rather than the reality of it. He had the ceramic blade in his hand before the thought was complete, not to use on anyone, but to work the shim technique on the padlock shackle, a process that took 40 seconds on a lock this quality and left no visible damage. The shackle released. He removed the padlock, set it on the floor, opened the door. The partition space was roughly 12 by 15 feet. A cot, a folding chair, a plastic bucket in the corner that he deliberately didn't look at longer than necessary, and a sleeping bag on the cot with a shape inside it, small, curled away from the door. The specific configuration of a person who has learned to sleep facing the wall because facing the room means seeing the room. He crouched beside the cot. "Sasha," he said. Quiet, level, a voice calibrated for the space between alarm and reassurance. "My name is Adrian. I'm here to take you home." A beat of absolute silence. Then the sleeping bag moved and she came up fast, scrambling backward until her back hit the partition wall, and he saw her face for the first time in person rather than in a photograph. The dark eyes, the 2 big ears, the scar at the corner of her mouth, and an expression that was cycling through fear and disbelief, and something desperate and fragile underneath both of those things that didn't have a clean name. "Who are you?" she whispered. "I work with a man named Carver," he said. "Dale Carver. Your father hired him to find you." Something cracked open in her face. "My dad is fine. He's been looking for you since the day you disappeared." He held her gaze. "We need to move right now. Can you walk?" She looked at her feet, then at him. "Yeah." A pause. "Yeah, I can walk." "Good." He stood. "Stay close to me, stay quiet, do exactly what I do. If I stop, you stop. If I run, you run. If I tell you to get down, you get down without asking why, okay?" She nodded. She was pulling on her shoes, sneakers, still tied from however long ago she'd taken them off. And she did it fast, hands shaking but functioning, and Adrian saw in that efficiency the particular resilience of people who have been in frightening situations long enough to stop being paralyzed by them and start adapting to them instead. She was tough. 14, and she was tough. He moved to the partition door, checked the main room. Empty, unchanged. He pressed the radio. 2 clicks. Sousa's radio response came back in 3 seconds. 1 long click. Guard position unchanged. He moved. They crossed the main room fast. Him first, her a step behind and to his right, her hand finding the back of his jacket and holding it without being told. The instinct of someone who has understood immediately that physical contact with the person guiding you is both orientation and commitment. Through the south door, the same controlled egress, but faster now. Speed was the priority over silence on the exit. Every second of exposure on the compound interior was a second with diminishing returns. Outside. Cold air. She gasped at it, the shock of real temperature after days of propane warmth, and he put his hand on her upper arm and kept her moving along the south face toward the southwest corner. 22 paces. The fence. "I'm going over first," he said. "When I'm on the other side, I'm going to help you from the top. Don't stop moving." She looked at the chain link and the barbed wire strands above it, and he watched her make the decision, watched her weigh the fence against whatever was behind the plywood partition, and it took her maybe 1 second. "Okay," she said. He went over, came down, reached back up, and she was already climbing, faster than he'd expected, scraping her palm on the chain link. He heard her intake of breath at the pain. She didn't make a sound beyond that. And at the top, his hands found her arms, and he took as much of her weight as he could manage, and brought her down the outside face in a controlled descent that was not graceful and was not painless, but delivered her to the ground on the outside of the compound on her feet. He pressed the radio 3 times. They moved. Through the shrub line, along the fence exterior, back to the road. He could hear Decker's truck before he saw it. A low engine rumble, moving, the headlights off, by the ambient light of the Port District as it came around the corner at a pace that was urgent without being panicked. It pulled alongside them, and the back door swung open from the inside. Souza, she'd made it back to the vehicle. She was in the back. And Adrian put Sasha in first and came in behind her, and Decker had them moving before the door was fully closed. No one spoke for the first 40 seconds. Then Sasha said very quietly, "I thought nobody was coming." "I know," Souza said. She was sitting on the girl's other side, and she'd taken her own jacket off and put it around Sasha's shoulders. And she was not making a production of it, just doing it, the way practical care gets done. "You're okay now." Sasha looked at Adrian. "You're really just... Carver just found you?" "Something like that," he said. "How?" He looked out the window at the Port District moving past. The amber lights, the container shapes in the dark, the ordinary industrial geography of a city that didn't know what had just happened in one of its warehouse compounds, and wouldn't. "I was fixing a heater," he said. She looked at him like he was speaking a different language. "I'll explain later," Souza said gently. "Let's just get you to your dad." Marcus Reeves was waiting at Carver's office. He'd been called 30 minutes before, told only that there was news and to come immediately, and he'd driven across town in the kind of suspended state that parents in that situation inhabit. Not hope exactly, too fragile for hope. Something more like a breath held past the point of comfort, because releasing it means acknowledging what might have replaced it. When the door opened and his daughter walked through it, he didn't say anything. He crossed the room in 2 steps, and she crossed the room in 2 steps, and they met in the middle, and he put both arms around her and she put her face against his shoulder, and they stood there making the specific silence of 2 people who have been on opposite sides of something very bad and have found each other on the other side of it. Adrian stood near the door. He watched for a moment. Then he looked at the wall. Carver appeared at his elbow, quiet. He offered his hand and Adrian took it. "Thank you," Carver said. "She did the hard part," Adrian said. "She held together for 6 days in a room by herself. That's not something I did." "Still," Adrian nodded. Across the room, Sasha had pulled back enough to look at her father's face, and Marcus Reeves was doing what parents do in that moment, running his eyes over every visible inch of her, cataloging, assessing, the inventory of a person who needs to confirm with his own perception that the thing in front of him is real and present and intact. "Did they hurt you?" Marcus said. "No." She shook her head. "They just kept me there. They kept saying it was temporary. It would be over soon." She paused. "I didn't know what that meant." "It's over," he said. "It's done." She nodded. She was crying, quietly, without drama. The kind of crying that happens when the held breath finally releases. Adrian picked up his jacket from the chair where he'd set it. He moved toward the door. "Knox." Carver again. He stopped. "The police have been briefed. The right people, not the compromised channel. They'll move on the compound within the hour. Vask and his operation are done." A pause. "Your involvement isn't in any report. Officially, an anonymous tip led to a welfare check that escalated to a raid. You don't exist in any of this." "Good," Adrian said. "Is that enough for you?" Adrian thought about the question. I got paid in outcomes, he said, not paperwork. He went out the door. Dawn was still an hour away when he pulled into his own driveway. He sat in the blue pickup for a moment. He'd return it to Clement Street later, or Carver would arrange retrieval. It didn't matter right now. And let the engine idle and watch the dark front of his house with its ordinary features. The porch light he left on when he was out at night. The window of the front room with the curtain he'd never replaced. The driveway with the oil stain from a leak he'd fixed 6 months ago that the pavement still remembered. Ordinary house. He went inside. Copper met him at the door with the full-body enthusiasm of a dog who has decided that any homecoming is worth celebrating completely, regardless of the hour, and Adrian crouched down on the hallway floor and let the dog climb half into his lap and put his chin on Adrian's shoulder, and he held on to the animal for a moment longer than usual, one hand on the warm side of his rib cage, feeling him breathe. I know, he said. He showered. He changed. He made coffee before he thought about whether he was hungry and drank it at the kitchen table and watched the window lighten incrementally from black to gray to the pale silver that preceded actual dawn. His phone buzzed at 6:12. Victor Hale. He almost didn't answer. Then he picked up. Knox, turn on the local news. He didn't own a television. He opened his laptop and found the local station's live feed, and there it was, the south edge of the Port District. Familiar geography now, police vehicles and Port Authority trucks and news cameras behind a perimeter on the access road. The chyron read, Ridgeport Port District raid, multiple arrests, missing girl found safe. He watched for 30 seconds. Okay, he said. You know anything about that? Victor said. I fixed a heater last night, Adrian said. A long pause. Then Victor made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. All right, he said. Listen, I've got a reason I'm calling. Blake Carter is here. Adrian set down his coffee cup. He came in early. He's been here since 5:30, just working. But he asked me, Knox, he actually asked me if I would reach out to you. He wants to talk. Victor's voice was careful. He's not the same kid he was Monday night. I don't know exactly what happened in that gym. I don't know everything you are. I probably don't need to. But whatever it was, it got through to him in some way I haven't seen before. Adrian looked at the laptop screen. The news cameras, the police perimeter, a paramedic truck in the background, and for a moment he thought he could make out a familiar figure near it, small, dark-haired, a jacket that wasn't hers around her shoulders, before the camera angle shifted. Tell him I'll be there at 9, Adrian said. Iron Forge at 9 in the morning was different from Iron Forge at midnight. The light came in from the east-facing windows at a low angle, catching the dust in the air above the mats, and the youth class that had just finished left its residue in the form of scattered cones and 2 jump ropes coiled imperfectly by the equipment rack. The heater ran steady and even, warm air moving through the building without drama. Blake Carter was at the heavy bags. He was alone. He'd been told to expect Adrian, and he hadn't gone anywhere, which Adrian noted. He stopped working the bag when Adrian came through the door and stood there with his wraps on and his chest heaving and sweat on his face. And for the first time since Adrian had met him, he looked like someone who didn't know what to do with his hands. Hey, he said. Hey, Adrian said. Blake picked up a water bottle, drank, set it down. He looked at the floor, then at Adrian. I wanted to apologize, in person, not through Victor. You don't need to. Yeah, I do. Something resolute in his jaw. What we did Monday night was wrong, both of us, Mason and me. We came in here and we treated you like you were nothing, and that was... He shook his head. I've been thinking about it for 2 days, and I can't make it into anything other than what it was. Adrian stood in the middle of the floor and looked at him. Apology accepted, he said. Blake exhaled. Not relieved. More like a man who is braced for a longer process and is adjusting to a shorter one. That's it? What else do you want? I thought you'd be... He stopped. Almost laughed. I thought you'd want more from me, like I owed you an explanation or a longer... Blake, Adrian's voice was even. You made a mistake. You owned it. You came here at 5:30 in the morning and worked until you could say it to my face. That's not nothing. A pause. That's actually a lot for most people. Blake looked at him for a moment with an expression that was making some kind of internal adjustment, a recalibration that didn't have a clean finished product yet but was running in the right direction. Can I ask you something? Blake said. Yeah. Who were you before? Adrian looked at the east windows, the dust in the angled morning light. Someone who did work that needed doing, he said, in places where not doing it cost more than doing it. He looked back at Blake. That's the only version of that answer you're going to get. Blake nodded. He accepted that, which told Adrian something real about who he was becoming. Victor said you might be willing to teach, Blake said. Not classes, just if I had questions about how you move. Victor talks too much. Is he wrong? Adrian looked around the gym, the mats, the bags, the ring, the east windows with the morning light coming through. The heater he'd fixed running quietly in the walls around all of it, keeping the building warm the way important things keep their buildings warm, without announcement, without recognition, without requiring anyone to notice it in order to do its work. Ask Victor to put together a small group, he said. People who want to learn how to not get hurt, not people who want to hurt other people. There's a difference, and I'll be able to tell which one I'm looking at in about 5 minutes. Blake nodded slowly. And you'd come in? On Thursdays, Adrian said. I have a lighter schedule Thursdays. He picked up his jacket. At the door, he stopped. Tell your brother about the shoulder, he said. He still hasn't fixed it. He walked out into the morning. The Ridgeport news cycle moved on from the Port District raid by afternoon. 5 arrests. A federal charge referral on 2 of the names. Theo Vask taken into custody without incident at a downtown hotel where he'd been spending the night, which said something about where he'd positioned himself relative to his own operation's risk. The missing girl, unnamed in media reports because she was a minor, had been recovered and was in good health. Her father had issued a brief statement through an attorney expressing gratitude to law enforcement and requesting privacy. No mention of an anonymous tip. No mention of a blue pickup truck on a side street at 1 a.m. No mention of a secondary door and an 8-year-old permit annotation, or a south-face approach, or chain-link fence traversed in 11 seconds by a man who had spent 2 years trying to forget how to do it. Adrian read the coverage over lunch, another meal at the kitchen table, actual hot food this time, eggs and toast, because he'd slept 4 hours after getting home and woken up properly hungry for the first time in days. He read it, set his phone down, and ate. Copper sat next to his chair and watched the eggs with the focused optimism of an animal that understands that persistence occasionally produces toast edges. Adrian gave him the last piece. Don't tell anyone, he said. That afternoon, he returned Carver's blue pickup to Clement Street, left the keys in the magnetic box, and walked home. 3 miles, hands in his jacket pockets, through the midday geography of Ridgeport in November. The cold that had settled in for the season. The leafless trees, the particular quality of light in a northern city when the sun sits low and the shadows run long even at noon. I thought about what he'd said to Victor, what they were. Present tense. He'd been carrying the past like contraband, something to hide, something that disqualified him from the ordinary world he was trying to occupy. He told himself that the work was behind him, that the man who'd done it was a different person, that grease-covered hands and service orders and broken heaters were the real version of him, and everything before was something to be managed, contained, not cross-contaminated into the life he was building. But Sasha Reeves had been in a room for 6 days, and he'd been the right person to go in. Both things were true. They'd always both been true. He just needed a 14-year-old girl and 2 arrogant brothers and a broken heater, and 32 hours to understand that carrying what you are isn't the same thing as being controlled by it. The weapon doesn't aim itself. The hand that holds it makes all the choices that matter. He walked. He crossed the riverwalk and looked at the water, dark and cold and moving fast with the November runoff. And he thought about Garrus on a dirt road telling him to learn the breathing or get himself killed. And he breathed, 4 counts in, 4 counts hold, 4 counts out, just to feel the shape of it. The simple, reliable mechanics of staying present in a body that had been places and done things and was still here, still functional, still capable of choosing what to do with what it knew. He turned for home. 3 weeks later, on a Thursday morning, he walked into Iron Forge Combat Center at 9 a.m. to find 7 people on the mat waiting for him. Not 8, not 6. 7. Victor had been precise, and the precision was its own message. A woman in her 30s with the posture of someone who has been in pain before and is not interested in being in pain again. Two college-age men who stood close together and avoided eye contact with each other in the specific way of people who are privately uncertain and publicly determined. An older man, maybe 60, with the kind of quiet that comes from having already learned several things the hard way. A young woman who couldn't have been more than 20, standing apart from the group with her arms folded, watching everything. And Blake Carter, in workout clothes, standing near the back with Mason beside him. Mason, who had shown up unrequested and unannounced, which told Adrian something worth knowing. He set his bag down by the wall. He looked at all 7 of them. "I'm not going to teach you how to fight," he said. "I'm going to teach you how to think, how to read a room, how to read a person, how to know what's coming before it arrives, how to give the situation every opportunity to not become violent." He paused. "And then, if you've done all of that and it still comes anyway, how to end it as fast as possible with as little damage as possible to everyone involved, including the other person." The room was quiet. Blake Carter was watching him with the specific attention of someone who has stopped performing attention and started actually paying it. "We start with the breathing," Adrian said. He taught for 2 hours. He wasn't perfect at it. He stumbled over an explanation midway through the second hour and had to approach it from a different angle. And one of the college-age men asked a question he didn't have a clean answer for and said so. And the older man corrected his own technique 3 times before getting it right. And Adrian told him the repetition was the point, not the error. When it was over, the 7 of them stood breathing, and the heater ran above them, and Ridgeport went about its ordinary business outside the walls of Iron Forge Combat Center. Blake stayed after the others left. He stood on the mat with his water bottle and looked at Adrian with the expression of a man who is holding something he's been holding for a while and doesn't know yet whether to put it down. "Can I ask one more thing?" he said. "Go ahead." "Do you regret it? What you used to do?" Adrian picked up his bag. He thought about Garrus, about the dirt road and the breathing, and a career's worth of decisions made in compressed moments with imperfect information, in rooms and fields and cities where the margin for error was measured in fractions of seconds. He thought about a girl in a sleeping bag with her face to the wall, who had held herself together for 6 days and climbed a chain-link fence in the dark without making a sound. "I regret the things I couldn't prevent," he said, "not the things I could." He went to the door. Behind him, the building was warm, the heater running steady, the mats clean and empty and waiting for whoever came next. He walked out into the November morning and drove to his first service call of the day. A commercial building on the east side with a malfunctioning ventilation damper that had been causing hot and cold spots throughout the upper floors and driving the tenants quietly insane for 6 weeks. He fixed it in 90 minutes. He drove home. The world didn't know his name. It didn't know what he'd done the Thursday morning before, or what he'd done for years before that, or what he would do the next time something came that required exactly what he was. The world kept its ordinary face turned toward ordinary things, and he was fine with that. He had always been fine with that. Some people spend their whole lives trying to be seen. The ones who carry the most are usually the ones you'd never notice. Standing in the corner, doing the quiet work, holding the thing up that everyone else is standing on without knowing it. Strength was never about who was loudest. It was about who stayed.